Hello. How you
Hello.
how you doing, Brian?
Hey, doing well. How about you? We survived RSA.
We did. We did. We nourished ourselves so that we can keep giving.
It's always one of my favorite events going to every year. I mean, if not my favorite. So it's always, I mean, just the opportunity to network, to see everybody. I don't know. I always still call it geek camp every year.
It is. Connecting as humans when we're working at home so much, it's really necessary for us all. And I loved every minute of it myself, and I was exhausted. It's
Oh,
exhausting.
I feel like you turn around and you blink and days have gone by.
Yeah. Well, it's great to be here with you, community that has dialed in from all over the world. I know you saw some QR codes for the reports we're going to be discussing today. Brian and I are going to spend a half hour. We could spend hours. So maybe there's a take two. You let us know. If you'd like to see a take two. But really, we've come together to say CyberSN has recently launched great data around 3 years of cyber job posting data in the US. And SANS has recently also published some incredible data workforce study. And so we wanted to get together and sort of like compare notes and read off of each other's content. And we're super excited because there's a story in data. Thank goodness that's what data gives us. And the more data we have, the better, right?
Absolutely.
Good times with data. All righty. I'm going to share my screen, everybody. Don't judge all my open tabs. All right, Brian, this is the high level view of the report. The report has got a lot of breakdown between all of this, but if we just said, what are the top 25 functional roles? Now, again, there are 10 categories and 45 functional roles in cybersecurity today. CyberSN owns that taxonomy and takes it very seriously. All of everything we do sits on that taxonomy. And so these are the top 25. And of course, the data collection approach is here on the left. Well, when you first saw this, what went to your mind?
I mean, in some ways, the first thing that came to my mind was thank God, because everybody talks about headcount just being cybersecurity, just in general. And what I love about this report is it talks about different roles and how those roles fit in. As funny as it sounds, a lot of people aren't talking about that, right? Like the difference of a pen tester versus a security architect versus a privacy attorney. Like all of those are such different jobs. And sometimes I think everybody just assumes cybersecurity is just one job, right? And how does it fit into the whole ecosystem?
Totally. This is our biggest challenge as a community. It's speaking a common language. Even within these numbers here, where we see a security engineering role, being the highest, posted role, I guarantee you that looking further into these security engineering roles, some of them would be architects, some of them would even be DevSecOps. It's possible that,
Yep.
or an incident responder. And so, to all of you that are out there, either job searching, knowing somebody who's job searching, or concerned about our profession, what I want to say to you is that for the last 11 years, I've been out screaming from the top of my lungs that job searching and matching is a broken system. And it's a broken system because job descriptions and resumes do not use the same common language. And therefore, everybody's wasting so much time talking to people that it's not, their job description isn't the right fit for. And they're wasting lots of time because their job description isn't correct for even themselves. So retention is hard to achieve. And so the industry has a lot of opportunity. The getting to it, making correct matches for employment is still a mess. It doesn't help that job postings are super cheap and you can
Okay.
apply to a job by the click of a button, Brian. That
Well,
doesn't help.
and sometimes what I always say is there's a skills gap, but there's also an expectations gap too. In other words, you have these job descriptions that are looking for individuals that don't exist, right?
Yes, it used
Is
to be
that
called the unicorn.
Yep, they're looking for a unicorn, and there's only so many unicorns in the world, but they're not looking at the specific job requirements within cybersecurity, right? They're looking for incident responder, pen tester, and a security architect all in one individual.
Yes, and that stems from poor budgets that security leaders have been given. And the poor budgets stem from how do we communicate what our people are doing, to get the right budgets and having the right visualization of how cyber talent is utilized. I mean, this is where I've spent the last 3 of my 11 years is just that gap assessment, that visualization. And so, yeah, I mean, when you only have the budget for 1 or 2 people or whatever the budget is, it's not enough to get what they really need. So they're trying to get 2 and 3 people in one. And, can it happen every once in a while? Usually that person doesn't want to be 2 and 3 in one. And if they do, they're going to want triple the money because they know they can ask for it. So doesn't really solve a problem, right? I know that most managers are spending hours and hours and hours going through resumes on their
Yeah.
own before they even talk to people, and then talking to people only to have no matches and spending months and months trying to fill positions. And that has landed on the market as there aren't enough qualified people, and that's true, but that's not necessarily what's happening in that process. And so let's talk about that qualified skill. I'm going to take this off the screen for a minute because
Sure.
I know that the SANS reporting really nailed that data of people. I think your report said 52% say that they don't their top challenge is they don't have the right staff.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that was a little bit surprising because in the past, it was always, we don't have enough headcount gap. We never have enough individuals. It shocked me because this was the very first year. Now, it was still 52 versus 48, so it's still close, but it was the first time we've ever seen, and the data is the data. Like, I can't say we nailed it. It's just what the data came back as. But for the first time, people said it wasn't that I didn't have enough individuals, or maybe that's still a problem, but I don't have the right people in the right seats. I don't have people with the right skills. And to me, that was a flip of the narrative quite a bit, because I think in this industry, we've always, for so many years, and I know you believe differently, and the data back that up, which is, hey, in a perfect world, sure, I would love to have 3 times more bodies here. But
Mhm.
ultimately, I need an effective and I need an efficient team. If I get that effective, efficient team, that's ultimately what's going to make you successful, right? And how do you get there?
Yes. I think that the data is really showing exactly what is going on. So let's look at this. Let's unpack what's been happening. So the economy, slide, interest rates going up, money not being the price it used to be, all, hit in October of 2022. Now, we saw it in May of 2022 because, when you're staffing at the level we are, and just staffing in general, we see economies shift well before anybody else. I knew it was coming. So that's almost, May, that would be 3 years this year. And it is true that the last 6 months, a lot more hiring is going on. But let's think about when we retract and we let go of talent, which almost everybody did, even in security. And then you sort of tough it out for a couple of years while the company, figures out its strategy, while there's turnover, restructuring, all these things. Now if you're alive, you got to move forward. And the people that are there are not going to be enough to move forward in all these specialties that need to happen. And there hasn't been much training. We were always not enough time to train because people are so operational. And then my
Sure.
last point as to why people feel like they don't have the right people is that, the cyber professionals are super smart. They're really smart. They can do lots of jobs. Like, I have a security engineer that could do DevSecOps, but he doesn't want to do DevSecOps. And so having them do DevSecOps for a few years, well, everything's, as people are doing, that's what I'm saying. People are grabbing their people, having them do things they don't want to do. That's also causing I don't have the right people, because they're there and they're doing some work, but it's probably not what they want to do. And that is happening for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
No doubt, no doubt. But it was interesting in our workforce report because in many ways we saw a lot of things that were a kind of a flip of the narrative, even from when we did it last year to this year. Now, what was interesting was last year was a US report. It was our very first one. We wanted to kind of dip ourselves into the toes. We wanted to kind of learn from it. As you well know, Deidre got premiered at the White House. You were there with us when that happened. But this year was international. But we could still take out those numbers of US versus international. And those numbers did match up. Like, it wasn't because now it opened up to international, all the numbers changed. They were pretty similar, US numbers versus international numbers. So we could still do a comparison just to make sure that that data was still correct.
Yeah.
One thing that I thought was very fascinating was work experience has always been number one. And this year it ended up, now I will confess, between number one or number two to number four, we're very close to each other. But technical capability came in a pretty far number one. And that to me was fascinating to see that, because I would have never have guessed. I would have just assumed it would have been work experience always. Like that narrative was just never going to change. So to see that flip a little bit and flip so quickly, I thought was fascinating. And I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts of like when people are saying technical capability. I read it as, hey, I'm never going to find somebody with 100% of those skills. I need someone who's going to fit the culture very well, but I need someone who is pretty close. I can hit most of those skills. But at a certain point, I'm going to need to skill them up. I'm going to need to upskill them internally, and I'm going to need to make sure that they're there. But I always think of, like, there was some case studies that we had from like Microsoft and a couple of organizations where they talked about, hey, ultimately the one piece that I couldn't change was the culture. Like, for example, Microsoft talked about how it was their customer success team, and their customer success team was not the 800 numbers. It was people that were heading up multi-million-dollar to multi-billion-dollar contracts with the federal government. Right. Those are very high stress. Ultimately, if I'm working with DoD, I need to talk military, right? And that piece, you can't, someone's either going to have it or they're not, right? So there were certain things within cybersecurity, but I'd love to hear your thoughts of like why that number changed so quickly, and had you seen some things over the years that kind of built up where we went from like almost a yin to a yang?
Yeah, well, we've got two things going on. As we know, the landscape of the attack surface is growing so rapidly, and third-party risk, supply chain risk, whichever we want to call it, is literally in the way of sales deals, and also understood as a massive attack surface. And only the engineers and the architects can solve that. It doesn't mean there doesn't need to be processes and policies that other roles and such will support. That need is legit, technical, and everybody wants to solve these problems. One of the things when I posted the data back 2 years ago, when we also saw a lot of nearshoring and offshoring, one of the things I said about why this is not good for us, beyond the fact that it's jobs from the US going out of the US, especially after being at the White House saying, good paying jobs in the US is what we're supposed to be supporting, you and I. I'm like, what's going on? Is that when we outsource those analysts, ones, twos, threes, incident response, those are the engineers in the making, the architects in the making.
Yep.
And so I am concerned. We do have a gap with those roles. We've always had a gap with those roles because it takes a good 5 years, or could be 7 years, to really create those skills of work experience, not just, the training, which they also need, and the certifications.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was a story I thought that was fascinating. So I went to the gym here recently, and people found out I worked for Sands. And it was a bunch of kids that were just getting ready to graduate. And they said, "Hey, we're struggling finding jobs." And what I thought was fascinating, there was one guy there out of like a group of 5 of us. And he goes, "The best thing I ever did was when I graduated from college in cybersecurity is I went in the military.
Mm-hmm.
The military taught me the work experience that you're talking about." He said, "Coming out of that military, I could have never gotten that by just starting my job, but I could get it from the military, and the military allowed me to now move my career on." And I thought that was a very fascinating, and it's funny because the guy even stood there and said, "I almost hate saying that out loud because while I found the military to be great, I don't want to be like holding a flag saying, go into the military, go into the military." But the whole point is building that work experience, right?
I have for years been referring people to jobs.gov for the entry level, new to cyber, whichever we want to call it, because there's programmatic, systematic programs to get into. We don't have that in, U.S. corporate organizations. Maybe, I think I would say the Fortune 200 have that.
Yeah.
Anybody underneath that, the budgets aren't there. The
I don't even
commitment.
know if I would say Fortune 200. I'd say maybe Fortune 50.
That's something I really think we should just go figure out, because if it's 50, we're in worse shape than 200 without a doubt, and we should really look at that. And so, yeah, for years, I've tried to do staffing services for no experience for free to help.
Well, and I think of, like, we had a case study from Amazon where they talked about building residencies and they talked about cyber hospitals. The reason why I thought that was so fascinating, for a couple reasons. One was, hey, we're taking the doctoral model and bringing it over to cyber, right? Like, let's not reinvent this wheel. But what I thought was also fascinating was Amazon's doing that. The largest, company to 2 companies in the world is doing that. So
Yeah.
what does that say about the Fortune 100, 200? Because Amazon's always going to get some of the top picks. And they're standing there saying, we need to put these people in a residency model to build them up.
Yes. And they're good jobs. I mean, they're stressful. Really, I don't know many people that don't have stressful jobs anymore. The era of digital 24/7 has pretty much made almost every job stressful. The rate of change, policies, procedures. So, I mean, this topic of getting into cyber has been what we've been talking over 11 years.
So let me ask you, and this is an interesting, and so hopefully I know I'm twisting it around a little bit. Sometimes I encourage people to go into IT with the idea that IT may be a good place for you to get to start and then build your way into cyber from there.
Yes, and getting into IT, reaching out to the cyber team, letting them know that you're super interested in cybersecurity. Is there something I can help you with? I'm willing to work overtime to do it is definitely something I also recommend. And what, one of the beautiful things that is happening right now, there's been a lot of chaos for a lot of time. So I love finding the beautiful things is that IT and security are starting to build relationships
Yep,
and come
absolutely.
together to solve problems. They can't avoid it anymore. And I'd also say that engineering's coming into that, development. We've been focusing on all three now with our clients because it's not enough for we can't have these silos, and the workflows and the way that operations is leaning on all three of these departments really is saying, hey, if we don't work together, we're going to burn, like it's on fire otherwise. So that feels good. So I think there's even more reason to get into IT, and on the engineering side, you can get into product security too. Right? Like the security team's always looking for engineering champions. It's a nice segue to DevSecOps and other things
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I thought what was nice about both reports is I actually think there's some really great things happening. And when I say the narrative is flipping a little bit, I think there's some really good things coming out of it. And people are starting to, I feel like we're starting to get out of the hump, if that's a little bit fair to say. And let's be frank, this industry is still a very, very young industry. And sometimes, like, that's something I always say, we have to step back a little bit and realize we're still a very, very young industry. The doctoral industry's had over 100 years to be ahead of us, right?
Yes.
And not only that, I think this is a very complicated industry. Sometimes what I always say is the doctoral industry, in the comparison, yeah, the technology changes, but the human body doesn't.
Yeah.
In our industry, everything changes at any moment, if
Yes.
that's fair to say.
Heck yeah. I mean, it's the law of physics too, or yin and yang, silver linings, right? When everything kind of blows up or catches on fire, or just, then renew happens. And the renewing process, there are silver linings. That being said, there's been a lot of people that never thought they'd be laid off, that never thought they'd be searching for a job as long as they were, because they didn't know the system was so broken. And so, I'm happy that we're getting through that. Those people are getting employed. And to all of you that have had that experience or known somebody have that experience, I got to tell you, it's one of the reasons why CyberSN has, of its core values, one of them is capitalism. And the reason we have it is only to never forget that we are in that game, and that the minute we forget, it hurts. And so it's not to say that there isn't commitment and love that can happen in organizations, and also recognizing that there's a money game going on at the same time. And it's not you. It's nothing you did wrong as a person. It's capitalism is my point.
I
And
mean, I think that's an important point, especially when you get down and
yeah.
when you're saying or going, why am I stuck? And is it something personal? What am I doing? And just kind of removing yourself a little bit from that, which, I mean, trust me, I feel horrible with all these people that are laid off and frustrated, and
Yes.
when they can't find jobs. And I felt horrible. I just had to sit in a room full of kids that just graduated from cybersecurity, and they said, we were under the impression from hearing the headcount gap that I was gonna have 20 job offers as soon as I graduated. What happened? Or I got a certification, and people told me if I got a certification, people would be calling me up and saying, here's a great job for me, and that hasn't happened yet. And
Yes.
they were great kids. They were very smart. They were very passionate.
Yes.
But I also, I don't know what your beliefs are, but like, I look at the SANS practitioners who are some of the top experts, and if you'd asked them how they started a career, I think very few of them would say they started off in cybersecurity. It was always, I came from law enforcement, I came from the military. They all came from these, and it's funny because it's about it's hundreds of different stories of like how and none of
Mhm.
the two are ever the same, but I was very passionate in what I believe in, and here I am. Like I always think of Heather over here, Heather Barnhart.
Mhm.
You know, she's the top expert in mobile forensics. She's the one that worked on the Bin Laden case. She's worked on some, like all the big terrorist cases, which are, I mean, ugh, just having to deal with that. But she became an expert in mobile forensics. Like that's what she does. But when you look at where is data sitting, with some of the most best data on your cell phone. But she became an expert in that one specific area and
Yes.
became the best person out there to do that.
Yeah, I think it's really frustrating to the new folks to hear that stories are all over the place. But the truth is, I have been seeing this problem since the day I found it 11 years ago. This is not a new conversation to me. The newbies have never been able to get in any way that says all these jobs are waiting for me. The jobs that are waiting are requiring experience because they need them to have already the experience. There's no time to train. There's no time to help anybody. That's been going on for 11 years for me. I mean, literally.
Well, let me ask you, do you think the problem's getting better or worse or the same?
Worse.
Yeah,
Worse.
I would agree with you.
For the entry level people, absolutely. Or new to cyber, absolutely. It's gotten worse because we're seeing, leaders stay in their seats less time. You need a leader committed to really building a program, hiring and training and developing people from scratch, so to speak, if you will. And then it's also getting worse because we are outsourcing a lot of those new to cyber roles, those SOC 1 roles, to either managed service providers who are hiring those people offshore or near shore, or to consulting firms that are hiring those people offshore and near shore to do the work. I mean, that's the truth. Uh,
Well, and I think in some ways the problem's getting worse because there's more and more people that have gone, wow, cybersecurity is really
mm,
cool. I want to be in this industry. So there's also more bodies trying to enter the industry
yeah,
with the same problems you're talking about. So
yeah,
that just,
yeah.
you know, builds and builds and builds from there, if that
Oh,
makes
totally.
sense. And I mean, here's my belief. I love this industry. I've lived it 25 years plus. I mean, I consider this to be my family. And there's many amazing people in this industry, including yourself, who I think are very, very passionate in what they
Yes.
do. Um, I could never imagine myself somewhere else. Like this is like once you're in, like I always tell people, don't give up. This industry is a once you're in it, it is an amazing, and you meet amazing people every single day. I don't know what your thoughts are on
Totally.
that, but I love this.
When I was deciding to found my own company, it was for sure I had to stay in cyber or get back to cyber. I left cyber for 3 years, and it was my tribe. Social servants. I'm a sociology, criminal justice major. I mean, so people in cyber are social servants. They really, really, really are. And I love working with them every day. And at the same time, I have tremendous empathy for the stress, the liability, the workload. I mean, I want a compliance control for caring for these people. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep going on that. I'm going to keep going on legislation as well as insurance, breaks for organizations that have programs to train and develop and retain their talent. So, this community not only is special because of their personalities, it's also special in that there are protectors. I mean, this is the most important warfare that exists. It's now cyber. So, whether
Well, we literally affect lives at times, and it's sometimes always when I say that out loud, I always feel like it's almost shocking when you say that out loud, but it's
it is, and even data can be saving lives. So super committed, and so is this community. And I think the community is ready to create something different too. I think everybody's feeling a bit burnt out of how hard it is. And so that's why the data that you and I produce can really help these leaders communicate to the business in, more strongly. So, on that note, one of the things I want to make sure for sure we talk about is the relationship
Sure.
between hiring managers and human resources. And your study brought up some really cool data that I want to put up here on the screen. So let me do that. And this is something that also makes me sad for everybody because it's such a disconnect. So, who are the decision makers? How well are these, are managers and human resources working together? I tell my clients all the time, and I want to hear what you think about this whole topic overall, Brian. I tell my clients all the time, it is not fair to ask your internal talent teams to speak cybersecurity. It's not fair at all. Like, I had to build a taxonomy, build a job building platform, and a profile building platform. I mean, to even get close to doing it right. And now we're going to expect internal talent who does just a little bit of cyber and a lot of
Yep.
everything else, IT, software, finance, all these other departments that are so much bigger. And so, I really like that you all are helping, highlight this conversation, what's happening. I mean, we launched a matching service 7 years ago because of this problem. Like, yeah, use your internal talent, but don't make them responsible for the match. And speaking cybersecurity, make them responsible for taking the match to hire, managing the process, making offers, and all of that. So when I saw this data, I thought, this is I hadn't looked at this perspective before.
Well, and I thought it was interesting. It was something, to me, the whole reason behind the data is to help people out, to come up with solutions, but also to talk to their leadership about it and, have something to back up what they're talking about. In some ways, the case studies are giving them the stories, but the data is something for them to go to their bosses, to go to the C-suite, to go to folks. Now, it's interesting. I actually did think from year 1 to year 2, because we worked with SHRM on the HR side. And then, as you can imagine, we had access to all the cybersecurity folks. But one of the biggest complaints we kept hearing was, HR, they just don't understand us. Now, I'll admit we didn't have the HR side to say the opposite, but I'm sure they're saying the same thing, right? But I have to admit, from year 1 to year 2, it is getting better. I mean, is it still got a huge disconnect? Absolutely. Like, it's got a long ways to go. But we really wanted to. So when we did this study, we asked specifically very early on in the study, are you a cybersecurity manager? Are you somebody who's heading up a security team? Are you an HR manager? And we even asked them different questions. We asked them some of the same questions, but we did ask them a couple different questions. But we wanted to hear from them what their struggles, what their solutions, what were they doing to fix it. And I mean, at least the good news is I felt like it's getting better. It's still, and I kind of feel like you, when sometimes people that head up security teams say, I get so frustrated at my HR teams that, they just don't understand. And I think some of it's valid. Like, I can think of some individual, it was interesting. They had problems working with their HR department because they said, well, we want to hire people that come from these top universities. And the guy that headed up the security team said, but those aren't where the cybersecurity professionals. Yes, that's great where the lawyers, where the doctors are coming from. But the cybersecurity professionals aren't necessarily coming from the Ivy League schools. And their argument, and he wanted to bring in people that were coming in from more cybersecurity, right? Those could be community colleges. Those could be, I mean, I'll admit in this case, they wanted to use folks even from the SANS program. But the argument of HR is, well, I've never heard of SANS, because while we're well known in our space, we're not, the general public doesn't know who we are, and we get that, right? So they said, but they're not Harvard, they're not Yale, they're not Stanford.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the battle of just understanding how to find the right architect or the right engineer or the right analyst with, they all could be 20 different types of profiles, and the battle of, well, what's the schools or the agreement of what schools or certifications matter and all of that. I forget that big corporate gets involved in that from an HR perspective. That, what's their background look like? And so, yeah, that's another place to have a challenge. I didn't even really remember that goes on. I don't service a lot of the Fortune 100, which I would imagine that company falls under.
I mean, I do think it's getting
Mhm.
better. And I mean, part of the goal of this, and I know this is going to sound a little bit comical, was one team's on Venus, one team's on Mars. How do we get them both to Earth together, right?
Yeah.
Is how do we get them to talk the same language? And so that was one of our goals. I will be the first to admit our report is not perfect, but the goal was, hey, I wanted to give people real content that they could really use. And then we started talking about solutions, and we started talking about more. I mean, part of it, and Deidre, I know you're laughing, maybe I even said this, was, I feel like people write articles all the time about our industry and they talk. I don't know. It's almost kind of like, since we talked about family, I'm one of those where I'm like, hey, I don't want anybody talking badly about our
Yeah. Yeah.
family. And so part of the report was, hey, I wanted to change the narrative a
Yeah.
little bit of people that sat outside almost giving us the narrative, as opposed to people inside the industry giving us the narrative, like the report that you've put together, right?
Yeah.
That I wanted to really, because I feel like you see reports all the time where people are talking about cybersecurity and they've never lived our industry. Is that fair to
Yeah. Oh,
say?
for sure. Or share data, approaches or things like that. Yeah, we got to spread that there's goodness here. There are lots of jobs. They do require experience. Now, I will tell everybody, if everybody, let's say, used my matching services or whatever, then yeah, we'd feel the shortage. But I always say no one company can say that, meaning, like, if you're not working a common language, matching approach with your internal talent, you're gonna continue to spin wheels. To your point, the goodness is happening. We're at the forward motion is happening. Any company that's still alive today has no choice but to move forward. And so reach out to either of us if you need help. We're going to put up the QR code again right now for getting our reports. We could talk for hours. I mean, we talked maybe, I don't know, a sliver of what's in these reports.
Oh, I could talk another 4 hours about what came out of
I
our
think we need
report.
to do another LinkedIn Live, because I still have 8 different points that I wasn't even able to get to about your report. So I thank you so much for everything you do, Brian and Sands. You really are community builders. I've had the privilege of working with you all for the better part of the last, I don't know, 7, 8 years, and you show up all the time. So thank you.
Well, and I appreciate all the help that you do too. So I think you're doing some really good, great stuff. And, you know, hey, it's all of us working together,
Yes.
right? And then I think of all these organizations, and like I said, there's a lot of really good people doing a lot of really good
And this
things.
is a national security issue. I call it workforce risk management. It is where we ought to be focusing our time and energy as much as the attack surface. So, on that note, Brian, I'll see you back here. We got more to do. Thank you so much for everything. You're
Thank you.
welcome.